before I start spraying art history at you, I'd much rather you look with your own eyes first. So take a couple of minutes and just look at this work of art. See what you notice, see what details you can find. Everything is fair game. I'm gonna give you about 2 minutes because we've got a decent sized group. Get close, but as always, as I would remind children as well, please don't touch, and let's notice as much as we can. What are some of the things that you've noticed? The direction of the eyes. Almost everyone appears to be looking in a different direction. You're entirely right here. What are some of the directions you see people looking? Sure, so you see that the female figure appears to be looking at the child. We see that the gentlemen generally appear to be looking to the upper left, perhaps towards the source of light. And then the male figure over here to the left is also looking kind of over and down. I know, it sort of begs a question here. What are we looking at? Anyone have a guess right off the bat?
The nativity?
Totally right. Not a trick question. What you're looking at here is the scene of the Magi coming to the birth of the baby Jesus, a story that, with the nods, I'm guessing most of you are familiar with. I mean, even if you are not a part of the Christian tradition, you've probably seen this displayed somewhere in America at some point around Christmas time. And this was a very particular example of this. I'd like to hear more, though, about the details that you've noticed, because at the end of the day, I think you're going to be able to find everything that I would say anyway. So let's hear.
Just from a little bit of prior imagery.
Right. So for you, it was looking at this and saying, I'm not sure immediately what it is. It looks like people, kind of old-timey perhaps, and there's a baby, maybe they're going to baptize, but oh, wait a minute. Look at those 3 hats. Look at those very specific types of people, and those being Magi. I remember this story. Absolutely fair. And when you're looking at the 3 Magi, the artist here, Mantegna, is actually trying to depict what was then thought of as the corners of the earth. So you see a representative of North Africa, you see a representative from East Asia, and then you also see a representative who is sort of from the Indian subcontinent. Again, ideas of geography then are very different from our own, and so you get these pseudo-archetypes of different races or ethnicities gathering together with the idea that all of the land is coming together to the Christ child. Kind of an interesting feat for an artist who's trying to depict difference in the 15th century, right? It's a really tricky thing, especially one who has never left Italy. So take a minute, and I'd like you to talk with someone next to you. How do you see this artist trying to depict difference?
Color, the color of the skin.
Yes, so the skin tone absolutely is one of the ways the artist is immediately trying to show difference between these characters. Great. This group here.
The age, like the gentleman in front doesn't have hair and he's got wrinkles across.
You're entirely right. Here we have 3 different ages represented. And in fact, this is something that sort of happened later. If you look at the biblical text, there isn't anything to indicate who these Magi are. It just says there are 3 of them. At this time, by the time we're getting into Renaissance Europe, we have whole stories that have been created. They've now been named. There's an oldest, a middle, and a younger, and that is also what's represented here in Mantegna's work. That's great. This group here.
Holding an object?
Absolutely. So each of the 3 wise men, the Magi, are holding objects. If you remember the story, gold, frankincense, and myrrh are the objects that are being held, and I love that you brought that up because this is one of the things that I think is wonderful for students. As you look at this, I tend to find when I'm teaching with students that giving them things to latch onto within the composition is a great access point. So for this one, those objects in the hands might be a really nice point of entry. So take a look at, for example, this teacup that's in the center that's been repurposed as a gold container. This isn't just something Mantegna made up. He actually saw this in Italy. It's a model of a real teacup from China that he used here. Now granted, it's anachronistic, right? This was not being produced at the time of the Christ child's birth. However, it is a real object that shows exoticism, otherness, something beyond the realm of the European day-to-day existence, and helps show that this is a miraculous story. something that sort of transcends time and place. Okay, well that's loosey-goosey. What's my, sixth grader going to do with that? Well, what your sixth grader can do with that is take a look at the object and consider it materially. So go ahead, and I'd like you to play a game with me. Take one of your hands and hold this object. Okay? How much does it weigh? How much support do you need to have? What does it feel like? Maybe use your other hand to feel the surface of it. If you're like, I'm not sure, look at it, right? Figure out, does it have ridges? Does it weigh a lot or a little? Remember now, it's filled with gold coins, okay? So you've got all of this in your hand. What do you think that cup is made out of? Yeah, porcelain, right? And so this can be a way for students to talk about material. You can talk about trade. You can talk about design. The motif is in fact one that was used in the Chinese factory at that time. Blue and white porcelain has a long history in silk trade, in the Silk Road trade. And then to see this input into the composition is showing the European imagination of what it means to engage with other cultures. So there's like a lot that can be packed in here and that you can tease out into individual disciplines, all starting with this one painting. And that can be a conversation with students about material, about setting, about place, and about power. And I think that's something that we're going to continue to see throughout this tour. What are the ways that these objects show power? What are the ways that these objects show context? And how do they show the relationship between the artist, here, the person who paid for the art, and then us, the viewer of the object? Okay, wow, that was a lot of things. What are your thoughts right off the bat? What are you thinking about right now?
And all of the symbolism.
Yes, absolutely. So using this as something to show that these stories are not ultimately static. These are stories that have lives of their own, and in this depiction of a narrative, we're seeing that story over time. We're seeing the central element, the mother, the child, the father, and the three magi, but then we're also seeing that as the story progressed, we get the ages, we get the names, we get those different costumes and materials that all come together into this new, larger story. Yeah. What else?
Sure.
Yes. So thinking about the Silk Road trade, how these objects came to be, in this case in Italy, how the artist would have had access to them, how patrons would have had access to them, and how this all would then come together to be meaningful for the viewer. Because the contemporary viewer seeing this, even if it was fluttering on a flag in a private home, would have been able to say, wait a minute, I know the cost of something like this, and it's beyond my means. So by having this in your house, you're saying, precisely, status. This is a symbol of the wealth that you have, the resources you have at your disposal, and the fact that you have an artist that you can bring in to depict them. It's a statement piece. This is your Rolls Royce that's hanging on the wall. Thinking about what this would look like in a space, because it probably was a private devotional object, so it was probably in a home, and to imagine light playing across it, obviously we're before electric light, it wouldn't be this constant steady glow. It would be something that would flicker on and off, that would be contingent upon the weather outside, and all of that would affect the way that it would appear to the viewer. And ostensibly to their devotion as well. This would be something that would have been used as a guide for prayer, or as a model for how a life could or should be lived. So to have all of that woven into an experience, and it's a lot, and it's just one object. And we have a bunch more.